you get disaster. Disaster not just for the environment, but for the crew that's stationed on top of that malfunctioning oil rig. 11 crew members were killed when the Deepwater Horizon oil rig blew out in the Gulf of Mexico last April. Soon after that explosion and the historic oil spill that followed, it was pretty obvious that the blowout preventer had failed to prevent that blowout. That was pretty clear. But what we know now, what we have learned this week, in fact, is that the blowout preventer in question was not built wrong. It wasn't broken, and it was used as directed. The Coast Guard hired a Norwegian firm to do an expert forensic analysis of what went wrong with that blowout preventer in the BP disaster. I'd say the Coast Guard, I should say, oversaw this. The government hired this firm. The firm set up shop at a NASA facility in New Orleans in mid-November. Yesterday, they released what they found. What they found is that, in our metaphor from earlier, the airbags, in this case, and maybe in every case, don't work. More specifically, they found airbags work unless there's a car crash. Then they don't work. The forensic analysis of what went wrong at the BP disaster found that a big burst of pressure that causes a well blowout can also render the blowout preventer useless. If the shock that causes the initial accident misaligns the rig's pipes and valves, the blowout preventer won't be able to work. Won't be able to seal off the pipe, even when used as directed, even if you do everything right. Quote, the findings of these studies should be considered and addressed in the design of future blowout preventers and the need for modifying current blowout preventers. The reason there are fears right now about possible nuclear meltdown in Japan is because the backup plan there failed, right? An earthquake and a tsunami knocked out the power at the reactor. You need that power at all times to cool the radioactive fuel rods. But don't worry, there's a backup power source. A backup power source that was also knocked out by the same quake and tsunami that knocked out the first-line power source. The same disaster that caused the need for the backup plan also killed the backup plan. So therefore, even though you're calling it a backup, you don't really have a backup plan. It's the same deal with the blowout preventers. The same disaster that causes the need for the blowout preventer, a blowout, actually blows out the blowout preventer too, renders it inoperable. So that means you do not really have a backup plan. You can call it redundancy, you do not have redundancy. And again, it's not because these things are broken, it's because this is the way they are designed. That is the engineering part of this story. Here's the politics part of this story, and the life and death part of this story, which is worse, frankly. The federal government is now in the process of issuing new permits to drill in the Gulf of Mexico, issuing new permits all of a sudden at a breakneck speed. Today, the Interior Department approved its 5th deepwater drilling permit for the Gulf of Mexico.